NewsNation contributor Lindsey Granger and co-host of Rising on the Hill. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Okay, so we're going to talk about gas prices because so many people are, listen, I'm talking to people who are saying, I go to the gas station, I just say, fill it up for $40. I can't do the whole thing right now. And many people haven't seen costs at the pump this high since 2022. So many people are wondering, is this going to impact how Republicans fare in the upcoming midterms?
Yeah, anytime there's a midterm election, we know that the party that's in charge, especially now that Republicans have Congress and the presidency, is held by a high standard because people want answers to everything that's happening, especially because a lot of the people that are inside of President Trump's MAGA base that thought that he was campaigning on avoiding foreign intervention, that thought that he was campaigning on lowering prices, don't feel like he is living up to some of those promises. So I think it's going to be a hard sell for the people that are now experiencing even higher prices at the gas pump and the variety of ways that they're going to affect things like even the farming industry that relies on some of this fuel to actually power the machinery used to farm, to affecting the food prices because they're not able to produce as much. So I think there's a lot of implications that weren't thought all the way through to lead us to this point, knowing that 20% of the world's oil supply is now being basically held hostage in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, and if we go back and we rewind the tape, so to speak, President Trump emphasized affordability on the campaign trail and has claimed it is a top priority in this administration. But the conflict in Iran impacting voters' faith in the president when it comes to affordability, not all, but some.
Yeah, I think, and also people who looked at this as a small and quick military strike might be surprised to see how many troops we've moved to the Middle East in recent days and how much we seem to commit even more to the extension of this war. I think of people at home are wondering how this war helps bring prices down, and they're not seeing exact ways out. There's also a lot of criticism about some other policies, including immigration. A lot of farmers say they were affected because of some of the ICE policies led to some of the people that they hired on their farms, undocumented, not wanting to work because at the risk of being deported. There's also the tariffs conversation. A lot of those same farm workers and then average Americans saw their prices go up for everyday items because of the uncertainty surrounding tariffs. So I think the president and a lot of Republicans, especially now that they're off during this break for this recess that they have for the spring, have to really go home and talk to those constituents and explain things. And I think part of that, on top of the fact that the government is in partial shutdown still and people can't get to the airport and probably paying more for flights, there's a lot on the agenda that needs to be handled imminently if Republicans want to have a fair shot in the midterms.
Yeah, and we're taking a look at how some of the reaction is coming in. Congressman Byron Donalds joined Chris Stirewalt on the Hill over the weekend. Here's what he had to say about the cost of the conflict.
Critics of the war have been taking some liberties, I will allow, when it comes to the short-term effects on the energy markets. A barrel of oil today is still less expensive than it was as recently as 2022. But don't tell that to Floridians who are already paying an average of $3.95 a gallon for regular unleaded.
So I do understand that Floridians and the American people, they don't want to see higher gas prices. Nobody wants to see that. But the American people also understand that Iran is a dangerous threat, not just to our country, but also to our allies. And
So when you hear that, how much financial burden are Americans really prepared to take on if it means tackling the current Iranian regime? People are, there's a balancing act to it, but what is that balance?
Right. There's certainly a divide about whether or not the American public feels that we should be taking the steps that we're taking in Iran. And for those people who see that it's necessary, they certainly probably didn't foresee it going this long, mostly because at G7 a few days ago, we heard Marco Rubio say that we can achieve our goals without boots on the ground. We heard Caroline Leavitt a few weeks before that say there's no immediate plans to have boots on the ground. And the president on March 19th say that we don't need to put boots on the ground. So now to see that there's a positioning to continue this conflict, knowing how the gas prices are already being affected, I think the average American is frustrated because a lot of people vote with their wallets. We saw the last election. One of the main reasons that Kamala lost to President Trump was because she wasn't talking enough about the economy. People felt that she was disconnected from the average voter who wanted to be able to afford their lifestyle. And so now add a little bit of what's going on now with $5 in some states, in California and other places, at the gas pump, people are really having a hard time trying to just be able to afford day-to-day items. And then when you think about the lasting effects that could possibly happen from holding up this oil in the Strait of Hormuz and the war continuing and Iran continuing to fight this economic war, then you'll know how farmers all over the place are affected by some of these things as well.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.